John Denver lived a double life for 30 years, and no one knew until now. Even nearly 3 decades after his death, John Denver refuses to be forgotten. In early 2026, the Nashville Symphony staged a sold-out tribute concert series, a Rocky Mountain High concert celebration, bringing together former members of Denver's own band alongside archival footage of the man himself performing his greatest hits. Audiences filled the Schermerhorn Symphony Center night after night, moved to tears by a voice that has been silent since 1997. And later this year, Aspen, Colorado, will once again host its annual John Denver celebration from September 30th through October 4, 2026, drawing fans from across the world to the mountains he called home. The question worth asking is, why does a folk singer from the 1970s still hold such a powerful grip on the hearts of millions? The answer, it turns out, lies in a life far more complicated than any of his gentle songs ever revealed, a life lived in 2 completely separate worlds at the same time. Born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on December 31, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, John Denver grew up inside the rigid structure of a military household. His father, an Air Force pilot, moved the family constantly from base to base, meaning Denver never stayed in one place long enough to form lasting friendships or feel truly at home anywhere. That restlessness never fully left him. It shaped everything: his longing for wide-open spaces, his obsession with the idea of belonging, and his desperate, almost childlike need for music as a private refuge from a world that kept shifting beneath his feet. His grandmother gave him his first guitar, and from that single gift, he built a world entirely his own. Alone in whatever temporary room the family occupied at the time, he taught himself folk melodies and country chords, quietly constructing an inner life that no military move could touch. After the family eventually settled in Texas, Denver enrolled at Texas Tech University. But sitting in a classroom felt increasingly wrong when music was pulling so hard in the other direction. He made the bold, possibly reckless decision to leave college behind, pack his guitar, and head to California, where young folk musicians were chasing the same impossible dream. He also did something quietly significant along the way: he changed his name. Henry Deutschendorf became John Denver, a name chosen deliberately for the deep impression the Rocky Mountains of Colorado had left on him during his travels. He was not simply starting a career. He was building an entirely new identity from scratch, one that matched the person he felt himself becoming rather than the person his background had made him. His first real break came in 1965 when he joined the Mitchell Trio, replacing founding member Chad Mitchell. Night after night on stages across America, he learned how to hold an audience, how to survive the grinding and unglamorous life of a touring musician, and how to keep writing songs even when running on empty. Between shows, in small notebooks tucked into whatever bag he was carrying, he filled pages with lyrics and melodies. One of those songs, Leaving on a Jet Plane, would eventually be recorded by Peter, Paul, and Mary and climb all the way to number 1 on the Billboard charts. Suddenly, the world knew his name. Not yet as a performer, but as a songwriter with an extraordinary and rare gift for capturing exactly what people feel but cannot find the words to say themselves. What followed was one of the most remarkable rises in American music history. Take Me Home, Country Roads became a universal anthem, beloved by people who had never set foot in West Virginia and never would. Rocky Mountain High and Sunshine on My Shoulders cemented his reputation as a poet of the natural world. Television specials, Grammy Awards, American Music Awards, and a BBC program of his own made him one of the most visible and celebrated entertainers of his entire generation. To the public, John Denver was warmth itself, gentle, sincere, deeply romantic, and in love with life in a way that felt almost contagious. His music made ordinary people feel seen. His voice made the world seem, at least for the length of a song, like a place worth cherishing. His marriage to Annie Martell seemed to confirm everything his songs promised. They were both very young when they married, John just 23, Annie only 20. Annie's song, written in a single chairlift right up the slopes in Aspen, told the world their love was effortless, eternal, and overwhelming in the most beautiful way. What the world did not know was that Annie herself later revealed the song had emerged not from a perfect afternoon but from the aftermath of an argument, a desperate and beautiful attempt to repair something already beginning to fracture. The love between them was real and deep, but it was not the fairy tale his fans imagined it to be. Long tours, endless recording sessions, media obligations, and the relentless machinery of fame kept Denver physically and emotionally absent from the life they were supposed to be building together. Annie watched the boy she had fallen in love with slowly disappear into a public persona admired by millions but increasingly unavailable to her. Those who were close to Denver during these years described him as living two entirely separate lives running in parallel. In public, he was composed, charismatic, and fiercely committed to causes larger than himself and his music. He stood before the United States Senate in 1985 to oppose the proposed warning label system for music albums, arguing passionately for artistic freedom and the right of music to reach audiences without prejudice or barriers. He worked with UNICEF, co-founded the WinStar Foundation to promote environmental sustainability and conservation, and created a land conservancy in Aspen that still stands today as a working sanctuary for wildlife and a place of environmental education. He genuinely and wholeheartedly believed that artists carried a responsibility to do more than simply entertain, that their platform was a tool that could and should be used to make the world better. In private, the picture was far darker and far more complicated. Denver struggled with alcohol and substance use for years, a battle he largely fought out of public view. He admitted to using marijuana and LSD, particularly during his creative process, describing them as connected to his artistic expression. But alcohol became the more destructive and visible problem. In 1992, he was charged with drunk driving for the first time. A year later, after crashing his car, he pleaded guilty to a second offense and was placed on probation with a requirement to remain sober. The Federal Aviation Administration, taking careful note of his growing legal troubles, responded by medically disqualifying him from flying. For Denver, this was not simply an administrative ruling. It was a devastating personal blow. Flying had become the one space in his life where he felt completely free, above the noise of fame, above the expectations of an audience, above everything that pressed down on him on the ground. Losing the legal right to fly left him more exposed and unprotected than perhaps anything else could have. His marriage to Annie officially ended in 1982. The man who had written one of the most celebrated love songs of the 20th century now had to quietly reckon with the ending of the very love that had inspired it. He married again in 1988, this time to Cassandra Delaney, but that relationship was even more turbulent and ended in divorce by 1993. Annie, by contrast, chose a completely different path. She stayed in Aspen, raised their two adopted children, Zachary and Anna Kate, with quiet steadiness and remarkable dignity, and withdrew almost entirely from public life. She gave no dramatic interviews and sought no public sympathy. Where John burned and rebuilt and broke again, Annie simply endured, focused entirely on the children and the life she was building without him. There were moments during the slow collapse of the first marriage that laid bare just how badly things had deteriorated behind the scenes. Denver, consumed by fury over a decision Annie made concerning trees on their beloved Aspen property, land that was deeply tied to his identity and his sense of self, took a chainsaw to their bed. It was not a symbol or a metaphor. It was a real event that really happened, and it revealed a side of John Denver that his fans never saw and his music never suggested. The man who sang so softly about country roads and mountain shadows was capable of intense, frightening anger when the internal pressure finally exceeded what he could manage. Annie never took these moments to the press. She never sought to reframe the public's image of him through exposure or revenge. She absorbed what happened, processed it privately, and moved steadily forward. Their private struggle with infertility added another layer of pain to an already strained marriage. Both of them had wanted children, and when it became clear that would not happen naturally, they chose adoption. Zachary and Anna Kate became the center of Annie's world and gave her a renewed sense of purpose and direction during one of the most difficult periods of her life. That choice, made from love and acceptance rather than desperation, said everything about who Annie Martel truly was beneath the shadow of a famous husband. Denver's love of flying never dimmed, even after the FAA's intervention. By 1997, he had acquired an experimental Rutan Long-Easy aircraft and was working to rebuild his time in the air. On October 12, 1997, he took the plane up near Monterey Bay in California on what appeared to be a routine flight. The weather was clear. Nothing looked wrong. But the experimental aircraft had its fuel selector valve positioned in an unusually difficult location, far behind the pilot's left shoulder, requiring an awkward physical shift to reach it during flight. Investigators later concluded that this design likely caused Denver to inadvertently alter the rudder pedals while trying to manage the fuel switch, sending the aircraft into a sharp dive. The plane struck the water with tremendous force. John Denver died on impact. He was 53 years old. The world grieved with the particular shock reserved for those whose music has quietly become part of daily life, a grief that feels strangely personal, as though something private has been taken rather than something public. That feeling made sense with Denver because he had always sung as though performing for an audience of one, not at a crowd. To you. That intimacy was the foundation of everything he built. It is why the Nashville Symphony's tribute concerts in 2026 sold out before many fans even had a chance to buy tickets. It is why Aspen fills every October with visitors who have carried his songs through entire lifetimes and still need them. It is why Take Me Home, Country Roads has been adopted by a state he never lived in, sung at sporting events, graduations, and funerals by people of every age and background. Nearly 30 years after his death, a full orchestra still plays his music to a standing room crowd, and people still cry not from nostalgia alone, but from recognition. Because underneath the gentle voice and the sunlit imagery was a man quietly fighting the same wars most people fight in private: loneliness, fractured love, the hunger for freedom, and the exhausting effort of maintaining a public face that bore little resemblance to the one he showed in the dark. He loved too hard, flew too freely, and carried burdens his music kept beautifully hidden from the world. But perhaps that is precisely why he endures. Not because his life was perfect, but because it so clearly, so humanly, was not.